Good evening, everybody. If we could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, meeting called to order at 6:31. You place your right hand up over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I must say it's nice to see our fire department here in force and our residents. Thank you. And Chief Nig, it's wonderful. And Ms. Maples, our finance director, thank you for being here, and everybody else. Mr. Russi, we have a call for a review.
Roll call.
Oh, that would help. Yes. I'm off. We did this last week. I'm off. I only have one a week, or one every month. Yeah, every week. Okay, here we go. Roll call, Mr. Russi.
Councilmember Lau.
Present.
Councilmember Crosby.
Here.
Councilmember Carter.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis.
Here.
Mayor Hepburn.
I think I'm here. Thank you.
Okay.
Item number 4, Mr. Russi.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We have a collaborative presentation to give you regarding the county study, as well as an update on some of our fire operations. You'll be hearing first from Chief Nig, then a little bit from myself. And then we'll also have a preliminary assessment. I'll describe it as from the consultant doing the SOC and the CRA. So with that, I will turn it over to Chief Nig for a moment.
If I could, just for housekeeping rules, that we are under if you're vaccinated, you can not wear your mask. So please just pay attention to those rules, and hopefully this will be gone soon and we'll be all no masks anymore. So thank you. Chief Nig, welcome.
Thank you. That'll work. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. I'm eager to stand before you again this evening as we continue to rectify much of the tribulations Laverne Fire has suffered over the last several years. As you're well aware, past events prior to my arrival led to concerns regarding firefighter safety, fire department sustainability, despondent employee culture, and questionable ability to meet community and operational area need. As such, Laverne felt it prudent to consider other options for its fire protection, community risk reduction, and emergency medical response services. The Los Angeles County Fire Department was the sole provider chosen to consider the feasibility and proposal of annexing Laverne into its Division II of their East Region Emergency Operating Area. A consideration at least 2 years in the making. Tonight, in order to postulate stability, we move to refocus our priorities, provide clarity, and incite commitment to the forward outlook of the Laverne Fire Department, whatever that may be. As policymakers, it is your prerogative to decide what you deem best for this community. However, as your fire service subject matter expert, it is my duty to ensure that you are as comprehensively versed in your approach to that decision. Go to the next slide. All right, tonight's study session will be broad in scope. It will encompass everything from timeline to operational and administrative comparison, to a preliminary report from our community risk assessment and standards of cover consultant, to financial analysis, and finally, a thorough understanding of where we go from here. In order to best articulate the timeline of events, primarily before my arrival, City Manager Bob Russi will provide the context and explanation. Next slide. Bob?
Thank you, Chief. As Chief Nig has explained, I thought it was appropriate that we walk through what brought us to this point. And this is a timeline, a continuum going back to June of 19, because as the council will remember, that's when we first requested from the county the initial study, I guess I would describe it as, for their input on what it would be to provide services to us. In April of 2020, we received that response back on what next steps would be and what would be necessary for us to take that further look at their providing of services. In August, the council heard a presentation, I'll describe it as the Messina study, which was a deployment service model report that looked at a variety of options, looked at our internal, looked at the challenges as they existed. There were interviews that were done, as well as looked at the initial study from the county on what it would be for them to offer or provide compared to staying our own. In November of that same year, council gave direction to do the further analysis and enter negotiations with the county as it related to providing fire service through having them provide fire service to the city. That involved doing an assessment of conversion costs. It was also required that we provide them with a payment of $24,000 to do that further assessment, and then we would get engaged in that further negotiations in anticipation of bringing back the contract. In February of 21, council took further action and gave the assurance that before any contract was executed with the county, they would put forth an vote to the people for their consideration. And the only time that it would be necessary to go forward, it's important to distinguish, is if the council felt that that was the direction they wanted to go. And that's essentially why we're here tonight with the information we have, because we are at that last opportunity, if that is the direction we want to go, to put something on the ballot for the June 22 election. In June of 21, the council commissioned the SOC and CRA, which is a standard of coverage as well as a community risk assessment to evaluate our current operation as well as the current challenges that exist within our community, and then get some recommendations back on what it would be to appropriately staff and outfit a department in the city. In August of 21, we hired Chief Nig to start moving in a direction of, hopefully, if we were to retain our own department, we couldn't further stay with interims. We felt we needed to have a permanent chief in place, and Chief Nig has served in that capacity. And council in November actually approved some of his recommendations for changes in deployment model, up to and including opening Station 3, as well as an ambulance operator program, which is pretty close to getting the staffing necessary to bring in place. And so here we are, March of 22, looking at what we have available to present to the council. And I'll be very candid, when we have continued since November of 2020 to be engaged in discussions with the county. We have had productive talks. We do not have a finalized agreement, and I don't expect that we would have a finalized agreement at any time in the near future. But we can share, based on the talks and the commitments that what we have been made, what we understand the various operational differences to be between having our own department and then also what it would be to go with the county. And that's what we're here to provide you with tonight. And with that, I will turn it back over to Chief Nig, who will walk through some of those specifics.
All right, thanks, Bob. Next slide. All right, the complexity that goes into these discussions and ultimately decisions are vast. It is vital they be understood and valued in the sincerest manner possible, considering how the California Fire Service continues to evolve and expand. At minimum, this conversation begins at the most basic of levels, that being the number of available response-ready resources within the city limits, who are also capable of providing the NFPA standard of a 4-minute travel time for first arriving units to all areas of the city. As an additional starting point for this conversation, it is important to highlight the several ancillary mechanisms which correspondingly make up a fire department's totality. Laverne Fire already contracts with LA County Fire for its 911 and fire dispatching services, and intends to remain consistent in that practice for the foreseeable future. Hazardous materials response, urban search and rescue response, air operations, and extended attack wildland fire resources are all highly specialized, high risk, low frequency emergency response assets, which Laverne Fire will never be able to justify deploying on its own. As such, we will always be reliant upon LA County Fire for these specialties through varying aid agreements. Broad scope community risk reduction, city emergency management, and disaster preparedness all work in conjunction with different facets of the county. However, will remain the responsibility of the city regardless. Should the city choose to further consider LA County Fire Services contract, Fire Prevention Bureau services would be included, however, would need to be integrated into the city's fee schedule, development practices, and code enforcement processes. Next slide. Having stated the aforementioned, we arrive at the essence of what a fire department does. This slide demonstrates how the Laverne Fire Department will be deploying in the coming weeks, and comparatively demonstrate the manner in which has been proposed by the LA County Fire Department. The county fire proposal offered 2 deployment plan options, dubbed Option A and Option B. It was my direction that the city consider no less than option A, as option B offered the same number of personnel, same number of apparatuses, yet offered less resources. I'm sorry, yet offered less paramedic resources. As indicated in the comparison, the in-city Laverne Fire resources on any given day exceeds the LA County Fire option A deployment by 1 station, 2 personnel, 1.5 paramedic units, a ladder truck, a battalion chief, and an ambulance. Regionally speaking, anytime the resources within a jurisdiction are exhausted, surrounding areas are often looked at for assistance. Such practice is accomplished via mutual aid or automatic aid if the assisting resources are from a differing agency. With all of our surrounding cities having contracted with LA County Fire, we continue to improve that relationship as we redeploy and offer better equity to our LA County partners. Regardless of agency, either agency's deployment will always be vulnerable to outside city boundary assistance, as is always the case with any fire department. Excellent. A fire department contract comparison extends beyond the day-to-day emergency responses and has several administrative inferences as well. Oftentimes, the deciding factor for a contract fire department and a jurisdiction's own fire department fall primarily on the ability to regulate internal costs, span of control, and an intimate level of internal and external customer service. Generally speaking, a jurisdiction enjoys the ability to address its own community-specific needs through access and familiarity. Good, bad, or indifferent, a regional approach such as LA County Fire inherently leads to a resource sharing concept. Accordingly, the LA County Fire Chief is shared among its 60 cities and other varying unincorporated areas. In this case, Laverne would be offered a fire chief's representative or lower ranking chief deputy, assistant chief, or battalion chief to address any immediate needs, depending on circumstances and availability. The Fire Prevention Bureau, inspectors, and other associated personnel are offered to Laverne out of their Pomona office and would be responsible for the routine fire prevention basics, as well as the daily input desired by the Community Development Department. Permits, plan reviews, and other in-person needs would also be handled out of that location as well. Emergency Operations Center participation would be the responsibility of the same chief rank delegation mentioned prior. However, it should be understood that if a county-wide disaster occurred, Laverne Fire would need to share that resource with other cities he or she is beholden to. Ambulance provider 201 rights are provided by the California Health and Safety Code and afford a municipality such as Laverne the ability to deploy its ambulances as it sees fit. However, once a city ceases to provide that consistent level of service that it has since 1980, it loses these rights. In order to maintain those rights, it would be imperative for Laverne to additionally contract with a private ambulance provider on its own if it did contract with service for service with LA County Fire. Private ambulance semantics such as costs, revenues, and number of in-city ambulances would need to be negotiated and can only be estimated at this time. For cost estimation purposes, a minimum of 1 ambulance was calculated in the following financials. Finally, the Insurance Service Office, or ISO, as it's commonly mentioned, has recently issued our department a level 3 rating. These ratings have a direct impact on the insurance premiums of all residents, businesses, and city entities, and are calculated through a highly complex and widespread analysis. A review of the surrounding cities who already contract with LA County Fire have also been awarded the same level 3 rating. However, Laverne's rating would need to be revisited after transitioning to LA County Fire. Next slide. All right, in addition to the LA County Fire proposal for services, another exhaustive and wildly comprehensive analysis of our department is also taking place and is otherwise known as a community risk assessment and standards cover. In pursuit of public safety excellence, jurisdictions all over the country look to modernize their approach to public safety deployment. Through response data analysis, resource effectiveness study, community hazard evaluation, and industry standard application, a scientific approach can provide the jurisdiction with a recommendation for an appropriate level of service based on the empirical evidence. Simply stated, is the Laverne Fire Department or the LA County Fire proposed deployment for that matter appropriately deployed to best address Laverne's overall assessed value, numerous target hazards, call volume indicated, or keep up with the anticipated growth? Ultimately, are we sure those resources can respond in the most efficient and effective manner possible in accordance with NFPA 1710? Regardless of direction this council chooses to move toward, I believe it highly prudent that each of you have the most amount of information available to you to best address those questions I previously mentioned. Although we are a few months from the final community risk assessment and standards of cover report, we are fortunate tonight as AP Triton Vice President of Operations and seasoned retired fire chief, Kurt Ladapow, has agreed to provide a preliminary overview of his findings thus far. The intent here is to provide each of you with the basic foundational knowledge necessary to understand what the true needs of our city and consequently what the ramifications are of not meeting such. His preliminary findings will simply give you a contextual foundation to apply toward the previous side-by-side comparisons. He will not be speaking directly to the LA County proposal or the comparisons between the two departments. With that said, I'd like to introduce you to AP Triton's Kurt Ladapow and hand the floor over to him for his preliminary report.
Chief, I know we went through some of our internal stuff before we move to that. I want to check and see if council has any questions on any of the stuff we've gone over at this point.
Council, any questions for staff right now?
Okay.
Nope. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. If you're ready for me, I'll go ahead and grab the screen. Mr. Mayor, members of council, can you see my lead-in slide there? It's a nice picture, one of your rigs and your emblem. Good deal. So thank you all very much for this opportunity to give you a high flight status update on your community risk standard of cover document or study that is roughly sitting right at about 60% complete today. I have the pleasure of leading an extremely well-qualified team on this project. I actually personally handpicked the team for this project. Uh-oh. I can't fix that echo. Okay.
Can you hear it out there? Can you hear it?
You may need to mute everybody in the chambers there, sir. Okay, can you still hear me? All right. At any rate, I personally handpicked this team for this project based on my familiarity with your community. I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. I actually spent a little bit of time when you guys used to contract with the private ambulance service. I used to run it out of Station 2. So we appreciate the opportunity to give you this update. It is, in fact, a snapshot in time, as all of our studies are. The document is prepared consistent with national standards as required by the request for proposals or quotes. And this is the most recent guidelines that we are following from the Centers for Fire Service Accreditation International and the 6th edition. We also subscribe to industry best practices, such as was mentioned by the chief, NFPA 1710. The study is formatted in the manner in which you see up there on your screen. So when you get the final document, in all essence, you're looking at the table of contents this evening. It is, in fact, a thorough review of the assessment of community risk, emergency response capabilities, and everything that's on the screen. I want to highlight the fact that the comprehensive community risk component, when they updated the 6th edition of the standard that we're using, they greatly increased the level of research and analysis that must go into the community risk portion of the study. And as we move forward with the community risk, that actually lays the foundation that we utilize to build upon when we analyze your performance, when we analyze deployment, and when we analyze the values of risk. You all pretty much already aware of your community for grant applications. You're a suburban community. That's your, I like to use the term approximate population because it's been fluctuating a little bit. You're at 9.1 square miles. This bullet right here, assessed valuation, is always an interesting study, if you will. It's a lot of money. However, buried in that and over and above that, I think it's important to note that when we do the risk analysis, we don't just look at numbers. So the protection that's rolled into what the department is protecting, including the 5.5 billion in assessed valuation, is homes, it's people's livelihoods, it's businesses that produce revenues that help the city coffers, it's businesses that employ employees with the trickle down effect of spending money within the community and helping the community thrive. In essence, when I talk about what a fire department protects, from my perspective, in addition to lives, in addition to property, they're also the protectors of the economic vitality of your community. At the time that the snapshot in time of the study, the department is providing the ambulance transport, utilizing paramedics. At the time of the study, 2 staff stations, 36 full-time employees. Your minimum on-duty complement is there in front of you. The service area, you live there, you're familiar with it. As we look at the dynamics of your service area, it's interesting to point out what you already know. Years ago, they extended the 210 freeway, runs right through your community. And what you'll see on some of our call concentration maps, the impact of some of the on and off ramps. Foothill Boulevard and Baseline, as well as Arrow Highway, prior to 210 were extremely heavily traveled, and they still are to this day. And then I'll show you some overlays of the way your fire stations are laid out, and some risk maps, and we'll discuss a little bit about responsibility areas. Traditional fire protection, paramedic advanced life support, transport, as I mentioned, by life support ambulances, special operations, technical rescue. At the specialist level, you are dependent on outside resources. First responder and hazardous materials, we call that isolate and deny. Life safety programs. When we were doing the interviews, we heard a lot of positive things about the work that the deputy fire marshal had done. Public education, prevention programs. All of the services that are bulletized here make up what we traditionally refer to as an all-risk fire agency. Well, let's talk about risk. Let's start with population density. Why do we care about population density? People, human activity, and movement, and habitation, all equals risk and a demand for services. Earthquakes are not foreign to those of us in California, and certainly growing up in the San Gabriel Valley and then moving out to the Inland Empire before I started promoting out. Not unusual. This is not an unusual map. You all know it's in the news all the time about the potential, particularly along some of the faults that align your city, and calling attention to the 75 to 100% factor within the community. Wildland fire risk. The north and northeast of the city, it's no secret. There's been incidents before. Many years ago, I was actually state agency coordinator on the Williams fire with the forest. And that's an interesting dynamic because yes, you have been rated very high in some areas within the city, but you also have a boundary outside the city of what we call state responsibility area, which is contracted to LA County Fire by CAL FIRE and the forest. So the risk is not yours alone to manage. However, it does have the potential of impacting your community. The gold line impact. My hat's off to the staff members that we interviewed during our stakeholder interview because it allowed us to peel another layer back and review the updated specific plan for Old Town. What this map shows is the walkability. And as we reviewed the impacts or the specific plan update, it was very interesting. And when we interviewed the president of the college, she even highlighted some of the changes that they're going through as a result of the gold line. And they were all positive. But this is your walkability circle. But in reality, we could take that and bump it out 1.5 miles and lay your specific plan in there. And that's most likely the true picture of the positive impact of the gold line. I think it's important to note that with that positive impact of the gold line, at some point, there is going to have to be there will have to be some significant decisions made on staffing and apparatus. As I took a look at some of the potential development, you're going vertical. Not unusual for planners with infill to go vertical. There's mixed use, again, not unusual. Mixed use commercial, mixed use retail, mixed use residential, including senior citizens, as well as low income, as we have all struggled with over the years. As those developments stand up, it will in fact impact the response and the demand on your fire department. As you go vertical, it will impact the type of apparatus that you'll need to purchase and staff. And as you see the addition of folks in all walks of life and all socioeconomic areas, you will start to see an increase in impact to your fire department that will literally demand that you put in place some plans to enhance services downtown. Multifamily occupancies, I've mentioned a couple times. People equal risk, people equal movement, and it all drives a demand for resources. Multifamily occupancies are high risk for life loss. Right now, this map shows where your concentrations are the heaviest. They're actually right within the footprint of Station 1. So right now, you've got pretty good coverage to that risk. As you build out even more multifamily to accommodate some of the changes that are taking place, that risk will only increase. Fire flow. So these dots are somewhat explained in the legend. So the bigger the dot, the higher the fire flow. What does that mean? The fire flow demand, as evaluated by the insurance services offices, aka ISO, and these dots in this calculation, these calculations come directly from the spreadsheet that ISO developed during your last rating. The bigger the dot, the higher the fire flow. 3-person engine company, on average, rule of thumb, you can calculate that they can apply anywhere from 175 gallons per minute to 250 gallons per minute, depending on the size of the hose and the type of stream they're applying. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to take a look at these numbers up here in the legend and realize that in the event of a fire in one of these buildings, it will, as all fires are, it will be labor intense. Labor, apparatus, the ability to put the appropriate streams in place. Your workload history is not unusual. It is interesting. In some agencies, we saw a bit of a dip in 2020 obviously being our first full COVID year. Your fires dropped. What we attribute that to in all of our studies, for the most part, is more folks were at home. They were confined at home. So they were there longer. There was less chance for an incipient fire to start and get out of control because they were there. Interesting enough, your EMS calls bumped up a little, but not to the degree that some folks felt during COVID. And then again, snapshot in time, we started to evaluate the first half of 2021. And at the rate the department's going, I believe they're probably going to be within range of the average workload. Monthly response, I always like to look at time of month, time of day, etc., just to get a feel. And there's some interesting changes regardless of where we're reviewing. As an example, if we're doing Lake Tahoe, we see the seasonality impact. In this particular case, December and January are your busiest months. You slow down in June, but really you still are running a pretty good clip. Daily response workload. This is not an unusual pattern. You see it come up on Monday, drops down. We attribute these spikes quite often to commuters, and this one to like a 410 work week. But really, there's not a lot of variance in here. Response by hour. It's fairly typical for what we see for a community of your type. Folks are waking up. They're getting on the road. They're moving. Movement equals risk equals call load. And, you know, obviously a lot's going on here around lunchtime. And then it starts to drop down. Then we start to peak up again right around that 1400 time. And right around here, it starts to drop. And then we see a peak here again. At no time are you absolutely dead in the water, so to speak, with calls. There's a lot going on, obviously, between 7 a.m. and all the way to 2200, and then it starts to coast down. I don't think I have my other graph in here. I do not. We're currently working right now on charting the structure fire responses by time of day. And I've seen the preliminary, but it wasn't done yet, so it's not in here. All incident concentration. There's really no area that there are not calls. I mean, you'll see areas such as, you know, up at the lake, and you'll notice right here at the park, there's a yellow blob there, which indicates that you do actually have quite a bit of activity, or at least at a moderate level. The green indicates low, but it doesn't mean you're not running calls. And as I've commented on a few times, concentration of, concentration of citizens, of residents, et cetera, and movement of residents. So here you've got an off and on. Over here you've got an off and on. Foothill is very busy, and all the concentration around that area is driving calls. Got quite a concentration around Station 1, which makes sense. It's Old Town. There's a fair number of folks down there. And there's no doubt in my mind that the crews that are in the audience are very familiar with what's going on in these areas. This is all incident concentration. Let's look at nighttime. You're still busy at night. Concentration patterns are similar. Interesting, these two popped up along baseline. And you're still having some moderate activity up here at the lake, but it's not a time where everything shuts down. EMS, without pulling the charts, the department's sitting right around 68–70% EMS, if I remember correctly. And so again, the crews will tell you where these concentrations are. We actually have charted out area locations within the city that have a high response volume, and those will be validated during technical review and become part of the report. Let's talk about travel time. Chief mentioned 4 minutes. For a community with your rating, the recommendation from NFPA is a 4-minute travel time. And that 4-minute travel time starts from the time the crews go in service responding to the time they go on scene. And what you're going to see in the modeling is actually the way the station response areas from a 4-minute travel time are laid out are really pretty good. We did play around with the model on moving one, and one is about as good as you can get. You have to be really careful when you move stations that you don't uncover areas. Now, also remember, the modeling is dependent on roadways, so you will see some gaps. Station 2, again, and you're going to see overlap, and that's a positive, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So the footprint for Station 2, again, because of the roadways, Station 2 within 4 minutes can get into Summit 3's district. Here's the footprint for Station 3. And remember I said this is based on roadways. The way we model, it's based on posted speeds, and it accommodates turns, stops, and grades. So again, because the roadway patterns, you're going to see some gaps. Let's look at all 3 stations. When you look at all 3 stations turned on, the 4-minute footprint, the way the stations are laid out, is very positive. The overlap is positive. Why do I say the overlap is positive? Some incidents take additional resources. So the way the stations are situated, the first due, second due, and once Station 3 opens, third due, it looks very positive. And actually, notice the footprint beyond your borders into your adjoining agency's response area. Effective response force, we drive the effective response force from the alarm assignments that are dictated by the type of risk that are identified by the agency. This is with Station 3 closed. This is a footprint. And I'll tell you here, and I'll tell you on the next one, the effective response force currently cannot be met standalone by the Laverne Fire Department. And you'll see this a couple times from me. To achieve effective response force, it's dependent on simultaneous dispatch with cooperators. Now, when we turn on Station 3, you'll see the footprint improves, and actually the service beyond your borders becomes enhanced. But I want to make sure I clarify it. This is because of the numbers that have been identified for an effective response force. The achievement of effective response today is dependent on simultaneous dispatch of automatic aid. Now, this ERF takes into calculation, obviously having Station 3 turned on or staffed, and the latter downtown staffed, which again, as we look towards risk, we look towards what's going on down there, the existing high fire flow requirements, as well as some of your multi-story buildings, that's actually a good move. So the chief mentioned that I would identify for you some preliminary findings. These are in fact preliminary. There will be many more. You've heard me say this a couple times. I'm not gonna beat it into the ground. Fire Station 3's response area includes a significant wildland risk in and out of the city. We all know what's going on within the West. We all know what's going on in California with our increasing wildland fire risk. The way to keep a wildland fire minimal is to jump on it quickly with the appropriate number of resources. Station 3's location within that high risk area is a positive. Staffing Fire Station 3, why did we look at Fire Station 3? Because it's not staffed today. When your chief was hired and came on board, things changed. He immediately started taking a look at your risk and making some changes. We put everything on hold for a couple of weeks to give the chief an opportunity to get caught up with what we needed to see. And what we agreed to do, even though the snapshot in time did not include Station 3 being open at that time, we agreed at no extra cost to start running what it looked like if 3 was open. I've also included some additional modeling on EMS that we're not ready to show yet. But once it's open, it closes a gap in the area and supports enhanced coverage during times of high call volume. That goes back to what I was sharing with you, first due, second due, third due. As the crews are running more and more multiple simultaneous calls, that overlap is extremely important from a service perspective. Whoop. I mentioned this already, but several indicators such as high fire flow, increased building elevations will and do support the need for a staffed truck company. And you'll see the last bullet, I've already spoken to this. As you see that area develop, and it looks very positive, there will have to be some decisions made on additional staffing and additional response apparatus. That is all I have. I'll give the screen back to you, Chief. Whoop, sorry.
Back to that. All right. Thank you, Kurt. We look forward to hearing your final report and conclusions in the coming months. Kurt will remain on the meeting and be available for any questions you may have specific to his presentation after my conclusion. Next slide. There we go. Okay. Taking into account the preliminary perspective that Kurt provided, the other side of the conversation is always the financial ability to meet the aforementioned demand. The following 5 slides will provide the context necessary to understand not only the cost to convert your pre-existing fire department, but also provide historical perspective and a side-by-side comparison as they relate to the projected fiscal impacts of each. Next slide. In the process of transitioning over to LA County Fire, there are several one-time costs required to convert and effectively terminate the existence of Laverne's Fire Department. Those conversion costs are as followed. Converting 2 fire stations, $446,730. The city will retain sole ownership and use of Station 3 for its needs. Converting radios and associated equipment, $95,000. Training all Laverne fire personnel to LA County policy and standards, $736,580. Converting all Laverne fire vehicles, $911,068. Converting all other ancillary equipment, $155,450. Providing personnel with uniforms and personal protective equipment, $285,378. Application of a required 15% contingency for unforeseen costs, $394,531. The financial obligation of discontinuing my executive contract, $384,736. And then a credit is given for excess equipment and vehicles, primarily the new ladder truck, that provides an offset of $1,429,063. All in, that net transition cost would be $1,980,411 in one-time expenses. Next slide. In collaboration with Finance Director Marla Pendleton, the next several slides offer historical perspective and future projections for the Laverne Fire Department. For comparison, the LA County Fire provided cost for service and future projections are also included. City Manager Bob Russi will again provide the summation of those explanations. Following that, you will then be provided with the next step of either path before I provide conclusion to tonight's study session. Bob?
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, these are the slides that were actually as part of the original assessment that was done in the Messina study. So I won't spend a lot of time going through them, but I felt it was important to bring these back because they have been updated in a number of areas, and I will highlight those. The first slide is just to give context to how we built our model going forward for our current department operation and costs associated with it. And these are the major categories that are in there. One thing that I'd like to bring to note is you'll see that the total less third party has been removed on the revenue and the expenditure side, because while those are costs that we do incur, they are not costs that are directly related to operating our department here in the city. So to give a fair comparative purpose, we took those out. But one thing that is of note is that by having our own department, we have the ability to send these individuals out, which we are able to capture an administrative charge on top of just the direct cost. Those revenues provide a benefit to us that wouldn't be available if we were to turn to county. So just something to keep in mind, and it's dollars that go directly back into the department for equipment costs and other operational needs that they have. So this first slide just shows you what the historical numbers for Laverne have been. The next slide shows you what our projection based on those standard growth patterns have been, with the exception of looking at the current year, because you'll see here that we addressed the modification that was approved by council on the revised deployment of adding the AO program. So you will see that the adjusted from the current budget year to what the ending 2021-22 fiscal year shows. I'll just walk through that one, for example. So you can see that the net cost or projected expenditures is about 10.2 million. As you look below that, you can see how those costs are then derived out of general fund commitment, as well as the other external revenue sources that we have available. Insurance billing, Measure GG, which is the tax that each resident provides, as well as other funding sources. So the general fund is actually supporting about 8.2 million of that, and these other funding sources are picking up that difference to make up the 10 million. And then that schedule carries out through each of the additional years, which at the end, we project that by the end of 25-26, the general fund will be required to support 9.4 million of the overall fire department operations to keep with its current level of service that we have deployed. The next slide shows that same period of time, but as we look at the county in the option A alternative. And I will bring note to fiscal year 21-22, because those numbers that we are building off of were different than what you saw in the Messina study on 2 points. The first is on Los Angeles County. These costs are actually about contract costs are about $450,000 more than what was reported, because the county's costs for this particular year came in higher than what were in that original estimate. So we built our base off of that. And at this point, that base is built with a 5.5% escalator, which is what the cap on what the county expects that their growth would be, or that they could guarantee to. The other change is in the ambulance transport. We had originally reported in the Messina study that was about 800,000 to contract for that service. In looking back and Chief Nigg's conversation with a couple of the providers, that's actually about a $1.4 million cost item. So those two alone are about $1 million difference with what the numbers we provided you before. So then we built the schedule off of that, and you can see that looking to the end, the general fund support based on this assumption puts the requirement at about 11.2 of general fund, with a total of about 13.7 to operate the department with the county providing service. And then the last slide on the financials is really just a projected comparison, taking those two slides and the general fund commitment and the cost of operation, and showing what that difference would be. So the first, it would be anywhere from 1.3 million of general fund requirement to 1.7 million growth by the end of the 5 years that we have scheduled this out. And of course, that would continue to grow or change as the years go on. But taking a look at what our current deployment is, the anticipated growth, and from what we've seen in the past, as well as what we've seen from county services, is how we built these financials. Any questions on that?
I guess just to drive the point home, so that first year savings went away.
Yeah, when we had
Okay.
that $1 million growth shift, it went away real quick.
Okay, thank you.
And when you look at the fact that the conversion costs were going to be 1.9 net, those were eaten up certainly within that. The next two slides are the different approaches that the council has to take. The first one county services, or is this the first one?
It's a city.
Okay. So if we were to retain our own city services, these are the milestones, as I would describe it, that we would expect. The first would be for the council to consider sending a letter to the county, withdrawing the request for further consideration as far as them to provide our services. Because as was described in November, we are literally riding two horses right now, and it is not constructive to moving forward in either one direction when we're trying to balance these two interests. And I know from the chief's perspective and from my perspective, it would certainly help us to focus and become more directed if we could pick one course that we wanted to go. So to remove that would be helpful. That if that were to be the case, we would obviously finalize the SOC and CRA, and that would be presented to council with a little bit more depth and detail than what you've seen here today, as well as recommendations. The chief would then take those recommendations and prioritize them, have a department strategic plan identifying within that prioritization how to implement those best over the next 5 years. The council would then receive a report on approaches to implement, and then those recommendations would be implemented as they could be with sometime in 2023 that occurring. So that is kind of the schedule as we see things being if we are to retain our own. As it relates to the next option going under county services, as I mentioned in the beginning, the critical point for us, if this is a direction that the council feels is where they are going, we would have to decide on what our ballot language should be. Should we by March 11th, so that we can have that in time to put it on the June ballot. And then from there, the steps would fall into place as far as the advisory vote being held at the time of the election, all the way through to the remaining steps, which would be finalizing the agreement, and then conversion wouldn't actually occur until 2024.
Okay, next slide. All right, in conclusion of tonight's study session, let me reiterate my confidence in you as the unabated representation of this very proud community. We are at a crossroads where we seek to provide conclusive resolve to this fire department's crippling past 5 years. At the end of the day, it is the distress caller on the other end of that 911 call who ultimately feels the impact of our action, inaction, or combination thereof. The dialogue with our county fire partners has been ongoing since March of 2020 in this respect, in varying other fashions as far back as 2002, based off of the files I've personally discovered in my office. As mentioned in my initial speech upon appointment, LA County Fire is not in the business of subsidizing our fire department, and it is our duty to provide the responsible level of service commanded by the facts. We should also recognize the time, energy, operational support, and professionalism provided to us regardless of all of our very public internal strife. With much of that discord in the rearview mirror, it is important to note the current state of Laverne Fire and the recent investment you have made in improving this fire department. First and foremost, you recruited and seated a permanent fire chief to provide the vision and tools required to move the organization forward. You invested in the department's first ever ambulance operator program because you saw the value continuing to transport residents in their own ambulances while also bringing those revenues back into the city. You listened when I explained the disparity the north end of our city experiences with its fire station closed, and supported my move to reopen it with a paramedic fire engine. You understood the need to ensure the city's highly specialized ladder truck and was as a frontline responding unit in order to provide technical rescue capability within our city. Finally, you provided me with the operational area clout that I need to demonstrate that Laverne is prepared to equitably share in the East LA County area broader public safety picture. Fiscally speaking, with my redeployment plan, a new fire engine already on order, a new command vehicle already on order, a new ambulance already on order, and a new fire marshal in the hiring process, you have over $2 million in recent and pending investment in this fire department, while also soliciting the interest of over 625 firefighter and firefighter paramedic applicants and over 110 ambulance operator applicants. Numbers this department has never seen before. Something to be proud of without question. The LA County Fire Department is an incredible organization who I and every rank within our fire department highly respect. As a small city and fire department, we will always look to them for assistance in areas that Laverne cannot quantitatively support or justify. Let me be clear, this is not a debate about who is a better fire department. Rather, a mature evaluation of what best suits Laverne. Objectively speaking, the level of service offered by LA County Fire in its proposal indicates a reduced level of service within the city limits, now and certainly after our redeployment in the coming weeks. Laverne is growing and has several high-density projects on the horizon with both departments, which both departments would need to address via service enhancements. As exemplified by the preliminary community risk assessment and standards of cover findings, there is just simply no scenario where this city can responsibly operate with only 2 fire stations when applying a modern-day data-driven approach to fire department deployment. The 3-station model we are moving to in the next few weeks does in fact serve as the appropriate deployment before seeking surrounding external assistance via auto or mutual aid. Regional concepts are not bad. However, we'll always be reliant on resource sharing as a means of widespread efficiency. Laverne Fire's 3 stations stand to provide the best foundational starting point to meet the pragmatic needs of the city, while also doing so at a reduced cost. All that said, and based on initial costs provided by LA County, with the firm 5.5% annual increase, coupled with a reduced number of personnel, reduced number of paramedics, reduced stations, and reduced apparatus in the city each day, it is my professional opinion as your fire chief that our city is still best served by Laverne's own fire department. I do, however, offer one essential caveat to that statement. A fire department is a dynamic entity and will always require reevaluation and ongoing investment, both in its operations and its personnel. Although tonight is not necessarily about making a hardline decision, it is essential to recognize the counterproductive nature which is inherent with a perpetual state of unknown. It is my leader's intent to provide clear direction and vision for the future of this fire department, whatever that may be. I will always strive to ensure that I consistently walk the line between serving the needs of this community and best supporting my members who put the uniform on each and every day. Providing both with a concrete path forward, void of uncertainty, is the right thing to do. I sincerely thank you for this time this evening and prepared to answer any questions you may have for me or Kurt from AP Trade.
Thank you, Chief Nig. Council, any questions before we go to public comment? Okay, public comment. Thank you, Chief Nig. And none. Do we have anybody for public comment? Mr. Salinas, good evening.
Good evening. I am asking the council to go with Chief Nick's plan to retain our own fire department. We cannot go carry as shown in the presentation. We will have less ambulances and just less personnel. Thank you for considering this.
Thank you. Any other wish to come up for public comment? Ms. Beauchamp, come on up.
Nowhere on these slides does it factor in the Measure LV 0.5% sales tax that was sold to the residents, that they were told that this money would be solely used for first responders. Not one line item on there reflects that. I want to know why that is not considered in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Michelle, come on up.
Thank you, Council. My name is Mashal Cash Falgita. Call me Cash for short. I'm a Laverne resident, been a Laverne resident for 38 years, and I love our fire department. And I stand by their fire department, and many others in our community face that same opinion that I have. This is a great city. And I remember when I was really young, I'll never forget that firefighter that came to my house when I was crying because my oven caught on fire. I never forgot those days. I never forgot when I see down the street and I see an accident happen, and I think, God, I hope they're okay. And I see the Laverne firefighters that are there, professional and well-equipped. And we can get them better. Absolutely, we can always get better. But I believe let the citizens decide what they want to do. And we haven't even heard from our firefighters what they want. But I can tell you, I'd love to equip them. Give them the best that we have. And why not us? We're no different than Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Glendale, and other departments. We have the same citizens and make about just about the same money. We just don't have that population. But I guarantee you this population is going to grow. And with the expansion of that gold line, I guarantee even more issues are going to happen. And we have to have our firefighters prepared, ready to go. Who knows what's going to happen in the future with Brackett Airfield? Maybe that might grow. And if that does go, we need to have our firefighters prepared. You know, there was an incident that happened at the mobile home park. And I remember looking out there and seeing our firefighters ready to serve, putting their lives at stake. You know, their lives matter as well. We need to protect that. We protect the citizens that go on the trails up there that have mountain biking accidents all the time. And I see Laverne Fire there responding. But unfortunately, the fire station 3 is closed, so it's take a long time to get there. I'd like to see that open again. My son goes mountain biking there all the time, along with many others. I do worry about him. I worry about many other people that go there. I worry about our firefighters. I worry about all of public safety. I understand there's money. You know, if we can't have it, we can't have it. I get it. But let's just fight and make it happen. This is our city, and I'm proud to be a Laverne resident. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kashwagita. Anyone else? If you're
I'm
vaccinated.
Yes, I am. Hello, my name is Audrey Salazar. I just had a question about the ambulances. I see a lot of companies out here. Just wondering which one was the Laverne. I see a lot of care on them, and they mentioned the LA County. Just like to know what's around me, and yeah, just something I need to do. It's been a tough year for all of us, and you guys are heroes. You guys run in when everybody else is running out, and kind of feel like I have the same kind of thing on different areas. But anyways, yeah, thank you for the work that they do. Just wondering what. I see a lot of companies out there. I don't know if they're vendors or they're competing, or could you let me know which one they are? The LA County, the Laverne City paramedics. I take it all the fire stations.
We'll let you know as soon as
Oh,
we're done.
you guys don't know?
We do.
Oh,
We'll just wait till all the questions and then we'll answer. We're good. Yes. Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment? Mr. Bowen.
I just want to congratulate Chief Nig on his presentation. And boy, if we can keep our own fire department and keep our own police department, that is certainly the best outcome I would imagine anybody could imagine for this city. Thank you. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Anyone else for public comment? We have Lily Brainerd on. Raise your hand.
Hi, good evening. My phone has problem, I guess. But anyway, I want to support our fire chief. Such a great proposal. I listened very careful. So anything related to budget, maybe think, oh, maybe some cost. I know we could make it. We have no problem to get the budget for this 3 station. Because even today, I still wear this fire department the T-shirt. When I drive around the city, the sign to support fire department still everywhere. That's the voice from people's Laverne resident. So we all support and waiting for Station 3 to open someday. And especially now have campaign, something undesigned. So what if campaign really update to the level 4 prison? We don't want that happen. And then we call every day, even tomorrow, we will follow up this, we'll not let it happen. But in the future, what if it's really happened? And then there's a lot of new housing, a lot of new residents come into Laverne. So we know it's really, we will have so many population increase eventually. So fire department, we definitely need to have the budget prepare for the increasing, increasing jobs, prepare for the fire department for 3 stations, very, very important. We just on the news, Laverne make the top 3 safe city in LA County. The other 2 cities, very rich city. Laverne is not very rich city, but it's very well known as a safe city. So this is our Laverne's icon. It's how make Laverne famous, and then we treat it like a home. So I just so appreciate Chief Fire Chief Nick. So appreciate you come to our city to make it happen. So thank you so much. Bye.
And if there are others online, please use the raise your hand feature.
Last minute.
Please go, just, you got a call. Yeah.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Will Donahue. I'm a resident of Laverne. I was born in this city. I'm in college now. I live up in the Marshall Canyon Estates. When I was 7 years old, I was suffering from croup and couldn't breathe. And I remember when the firefighters came to my house and saved my life. And I can't imagine living in this city any longer without a fire department up here. So I stand behind our fire department, and I hope the city council makes a good decision tonight.
Actually, just have a question. Irrespective of the outcome scenario, I think the obvious choice for the people is to retain the city providing fire services. But the math, I think you said it was 5.5% is the average or anticipated growth rate year over year to get to those numbers over the 5-year plan. What is the projected revenue rate for the city over that same period, if not into the 10-year plan? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? If not, we're going to go close public comment. We're going to come up to the dais. Mr. Russi, do you want to answer some of those questions?
I'll try and answer a couple of them. And as far as the Measure LV question, yes, it wasn't called out in this analysis separately, but the Measure LV money that is used here is as it was suggested under Tier 1, which was for salary increases. And so the assumed increase is coming out of what's categorized as a general fund here, but it is still part Measure LV that is being used in that vein. As far as what ambulance company, we have our own internal transport with our own paramedics driving our own truck. So there's no contract that we are subscribe to. We will use support from time to time with others if needed, but it's predominantly our own. And if Chief, if you want to follow up on that, please do. And then as far as the last question, as far as growth rate, Marla, I don't know if you have a good number on that. We did use our trending for the last several years. And please be clear, the 5.5% growth was just related to the county services because that's what their contract allowed for. Our increases of our own internal were much less than that based on our historical growth rates.
Thank you, Mr. Russi.
And Chief, I don't know if there's anything I missed that you want to add on to, please.
Please. Chief Nick.
Only in respect to the ambulances. So like City Manager Russi mentioned, we do have an internal ambulance. We have 2 ambulances that are deployed right now and will be in perpetuity. When we do have surge capacity agreements with private providers out there who in essence back up our transport needs when both of our ambulances are tied up. You mentioned CARE. CARE is one that's in the county. That happens to be the LA County contract provider at large, but there is a number of private providers that are out there that are contracted for different things. Sure.
Thank you, Chief Nick. Council, questions? Comments? Yes, please.
Okay, I'll go first here. Well, you all know how I feel. You know, I've said from day one, I want to keep our own services. And we have such a unique city. Everybody says that when they move to Laverne, they say they move here because it's a special community. When you look back on the history of the fire department, it is so special. And there's documentation showing how it first started off as a volunteer, moving on up. It's something we want to preserve and treasure. You hear it from everyone that has these special stories about being a little boy. Every little boy wants to be a fireman. And it's, you know, seeing the big red truck. And it's those kind of things. As a parent, I had a little boy that felt the same way, and he was just mesmerized. And, you know, it just sticks with you that those are the people that save you. You teach your children that, and then they carry that forward. I support our fire department. I am so thrilled to have Chief Nig with us. Your leadership has been wonderful. Thank you. Your communication with all of us, the community, us individually. I appreciate that. And, you know, the firemen themselves, I appreciate everything you do for our community, and you are treasured by everyone. I had questions about the county, but that's not where I'm going anyhow, so I don't need answers for these questions and verification. The only thing I would want to know is, and I don't know if you can answer, Fire Station 3, when is that going to open? And otherwise, I would love to see us move forward, and I have total support to keep our own fire department.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Councilmember Crosby.
First of all, thank you, Chief Nig, today, and Mr. Lapito, right? Kurt, as we were introduced to him. And appreciate what changes have been made in the last month since you've been hired. The morale, I believe, has changed a lot. I really appreciate all the firefighters really buying in, and you listening to their recommendations as well. I believe I have enough information to make a vote today, but I just do want to say, though, I am disappointed that we don't have our final SOC today and with the recommendations, because those are things that could count into our decisions today too. I know Kurt has been working on that, has been meeting with us on that, but that piece right there, I believe, for full information and full transparency before making any decision, should have been finalized and brought to us. I appreciate Kurt sending the report today, but it's just a preliminary report. And that's my only criticism out of all of the process that we've been doing. I do support the chief and his plan, and all the firefighters, but just that one piece there, knowing what recommendations would have been brought out by the SOC and just having that report prior.
Thank you, Councilmember Crosby. Councilmember Lau.
Yes, thank you. First, I want to again reiterate the comments regarding Chief Nig and your leadership. I think that we are way beyond what we have been in the past years, and that's due largely in part to your leadership and your collaborative spirit, and I appreciate that quite a bit. I think that it's unfortunate that the LA County could not provide us with additional information for evaluation, but I think that also speaks volumes to what we might expect from them, and so that is coloring the my thinking on this pursuit at this time. I think what's important to note too, what is coloring my leanings in this matter towards keeping our own fire department, is the fact that you have been driven by data, you have been driven by facts, you have been extremely diligent in burrowing in every corner to find that information, working with all constituents to build that sense of collaboration, that sense of cooperation, and I appreciate that. And so I don't want to not let people know what a transformative experience it's been to have you on board with us. I also want to thank the fire department. I know it's been a really rocky road, to say the least. And, I appreciate the moves that you've made, your patience, even in the face of everything that's been going on. And I don't want you to think that you're not appreciated for that. And while many folks have mentioned their stories about being rescued and saved while you were young, you all did it for me in 2021 in January. So I really appreciate that. It was not a fun time, and I appreciate that. Even with everything going on, you were professional and you handled everything with every bit of courtesy. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So with that, those are my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Lau. Mayor Pro Tem Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the Laverne Firefighters Association. Your words that were delivered to us are very powerful, and that helps to make a decision on a stack of information that is incomplete in ways that we aren't able to fix ballot measure data in the first place. And in the second place, whatever it is that we're negotiating with county, I would have a very nearly impossible time
even talking about the negotiations or the ballot measure that county is providing because it's doesn't exist. It's in flight, it's changing, and putting a ballot measure on that says, please accept this offer when we don't know what is going to happen is something I can't do. But in your letter from the Laverne Firefighters Association, you let us know two things, and those two things are really important. And I think, and I'm talking to you guys because you guys are who support our chief and can provide him the conviction that he has to come to us and say, now's when we need to make a decision, and I want you to decide with local fire department. Because you guys are saying this two method approach, that time is over for that. We need to focus. And the other piece is that you're saying that if we're ready to commit, you're ready to commit too. And it's those two pieces that, while the rest of it, as some of our residents would like us to have a complete and clear picture on all the benefits and all the negatives, which right now aren't available for us to know. And in large cases, we have to make with a lot of deal with uncertainty anyway. I can't commit to the option of going to county services because I don't believe there is anything to craft language around. So because we have firefighters' support, I'm willing to send a letter to the county saying that we're going to cease negotiations.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Davis. First of all, I want to thank Director Pendleton, Chief Nig. Thank you. I want to really thank the fire department, the personnel, because as Councilmember Lau alluded to, this has not been an easy road for any of us, including myself. And we appreciate having our own services. But I want to make it very abundantly clear, even though we don't have an SOC, finished SOC, I can tell you right now that this SOC is going to tell us that we need to follow our NFPA 1710 standards, which means more personnel, more equipment, as the gold line is coming, as we've already stated. So being that said, and it's stated in the letter that Mr. Glaze stated, no more kicking the can down the road. This is it here. If we need personnel and we need money to fund our fire department, then we fund our fire department. We have retention, make sure that we have retention with our fire department. No more of these people wanting to go other places because we have a situation. We have a brand new chief. We've got a new mantra. We move forward. We've got our training. We've got ambulance care coming now. There's a lot of things that are happening, but we must make sure, I want to make all council know that when it comes time for money, it's like, oh, let's revisit this and look at county again. No, once we put this to rest, we have our own Laverne Fire Department for as long as I'm on council and anyone else is here. It's so important because the fire department and the manpower and the women that work for the fire department want to make sure that what we do up here today stands in infamy as far as having our own services. So they know when they come to work, it's not like who's coming in to take over. Are we going to go to county again? We got to stop this. It's the personnel. We've got a brand new fire chief that's already started with the fire personnel, with the BCs, building a new department. And not only that, with this new department, we are going to be able to have a mutual aid or an automatic aid agreement that we have the resources to give to them. They have the resources to give to us. That means, again, back to the money. I don't want to hear about money anymore. This is what costs to have a fire department and our own personnel. You can see by the numbers here, we're doing really good. But I just want to make sure we're coming forward. We're going to have to add personnel, and it's going to have to be soon. If we want a ladder truck and then another ladder truck, or another truck with 2 or 3 or 6 people at Station 1 because of the gold line, that's what it takes to run this fire department, to make sure our employees are safe, to make sure our residents are safe, bottom line. So I just want to make that abundantly clear. We don't have the SOC, but I can tell you right now that we're going to need to add more money to this department to make sure that it's whole. And I really appreciate that. And I support sending a letter, as Mayor Pro Tem Davis said, to the County of Los Angeles saying, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. But I think that we need to stick with our own fire department. We're rebuilding right now. We've got the funding in place, as we've stated. So I'm in 100% of canceling our contract negotiations with LA County and sticking with our own fire department, as far as I'm concerned, in infamy. And I'll make that very, very clear. So being that said, we need a motion. Well, for perpetuity. How's that? Let's go
Much
perpetuity.
better. I
Yes, we
get-
need
yeah,
direction,
and
Mr.
I-
Russing.
And I guess I just want to add on to what you were saying. I think, granted, it's been a long process over 3 years. And if you look at the timeline, some pieces were squished and some pieces were extended. But I think that the conversation that we've had as a community has enabled us to get to that point where we can make and feel comfortable that we're making a promise in perpetuity that we're keeping our fire department.
Mr. Nick. Chief Nick.
Just to address some of your questions and comments. First of all, thank you for the kind words. I do concur and want to emphasize that this has been a team effort, 100%, not only with all of you, with each of my other department heads, as well as the fire union. From day one, they have gotten on board with moving this department in a positive direction, with supporting me in a vision. And although not entirely understanding it at times, fully trusted me in the fact that I have not only their best interest in heart, this organization's best interest at heart, and ultimately the city's best interest at heart. In regards to LA County Fire, I do want to make sure that you understand that they have provided us with more than enough information. They have been good and somewhat diligent in providing us with the information that we need. There are times that they're frustrated, and quite frankly, I don't blame them, right? 20+ years of kind of going back and forth and, anecdotally having conversations about contracting out with them, et cetera. This is the farthest the city's ever gone in this process, but rightfully so, it's frustrating for them because it ties up their time, energy, resources, et cetera. So I would say that, again, they're a terrific partner, a terrific fire department. We're always going to need their assistance. The data will never support Laverne having 10 fire stations or whatever it is that we need. The ideal scenario is that we would staff accordingly to the data that is out there and essentially be almost able to stand entirely on our own for those high risk, low frequency types of incidents. But unfortunately, we are going to need to have a good partnership with them, and that's where we're headed to. I've begun conversations, at least superficially, with leadership over there about improving our auto and mutual aid agreements, to which they also agree. And quite frankly, they are excited to see that we are growing this department and headed in a better direction from an operational standpoint. I would also concur that I believe morale is in a better place. I do see a little bit more smiles nowadays than when I first got there. There's just a lot of exciting things going on, a lot of things happening all at once, which is a really, really exciting thing. But I have no doubt that there's no way I could be successful in this endeavor without those smiles that I come into and that confidence in that group, because that instills that confidence in me as well. As far as the standards of coverage is concerned, when I first got here, there was a lot of work to do. And we were working through getting all of that data information over to them. It's not anybody's fault per se. We had a lot of software glitches. That was also during a period where we transitioned from Laverne PD dispatching our calls to also moving over to LA County Fire. So trying to find the hiccup in that data was rather difficult. Trying to get that data in a timely manner from LA County Dispatch is also a process. So there have been a lot of processes that we have to get through to get all that data, as well as being relatively lean in the city across the board. So we've all worked very diligently to try and make sure that SOC is coming to us in a timely manner. I want to make sure that Kurt and AP Triton are given the credit where it's due, because they have not only worked very diligently on this, but they've also extended the level of analysis that they've been doing for us, really at no extra cost as well. So which includes analyzing the redeployment, right? Because when they were first given the scope of practice, they had 2 fire stations and an ambulance and 2 fire engines. And of course, we've grown since then. So hopefully the anecdotal preliminary view that you got is enough to say that, hey, this city does justify 3 fire stations. It does justify a ladder truck. It does justify ambulances and all of those other things that we have in fact put in place already. And finally, fire station 3. So my intent from the beginning was to have all of that in play by early to mid-March. We have an administrative captain right now, Sam Dominic, who is here, who has just been absolutely incredible. And I'm not even sure how he's done it all at the same time. So he has been very instrumental in putting together an ambulance operator program, hiring for that position, putting together 2 promotional tests, currently working through hiring all of those or going through all those applications for firefighters as well. We're right on track. So he will be putting on the first ever Ambulance Operator Academy tomorrow, or I'm sorry, next week. And we are, I don't want to give out any firm dates, but we are in fact looking at middle of March to have all of that in place, including all of our promotions and the ladder truck and Station 3 and all that as well. So I will follow up and let you guys know once we have that affirmatively inked, which I hope to have by the end of this week. So good things coming.
Chief Nig, I want to make it abundantly clear too that you have any issues or anything, or there's situations, go to Bob Russi, our city manager, and come to the council, please. We don't want this ever to happen what happened before. I don't want to do it. I know our staff, I know the firefighters don't want to do it. It was an ugly time. We want to put that way behind us and move forward, which we're doing right now, which I think is amazing. But please come to us, come to us to discuss and we'll talk about it. But I think you've got your marching papers. I think that you've got the support of all of us and the council, and I think the city also. So, Councilman or Mr. Russi, nothing? You're just leaning into your mic. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Of course, thank you.
You direction, sir. What do you need?
It sounds like I could take a motion and an action from council on abandoning any further discussions with the county.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
vote please.
Hold it, please.
Yes, sir.
Let's see, hang on. That vote.
Yes for fire. but
That-
that's just me. I'm just saying.
That was I have to report the vote for virtual. That
In other
was
words,
a
you can't-
unanimous vote, 5-0.
Just snap a picture of it. Okay. Thank you, everybody. It's been a long road. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to public comment. Anyone for public comment? That would be, we have Lily. She's going to ask about tomorrow meeting.
Hello, hi. I'm just so happy finally come out 5-0. Okay, I think I follow up this one. I even wear this shirt for 2 years. I guess it's more than 2 years. So I'm just so happy. This one final result is really come out 5-0. So I'm so appreciate that. And also I 100% agree with our mayor Tim Haben. So we will no longer consider any proposal from county, LA, a county fire. So that's it. I think I could present a lot of people like me who support fire department for a long, long time. Thank you so much. So everybody make Laverne be a better place to live. Remember, follow up the campaign. Campaign still not end yet. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I talk? Any other public comment? We'll close public comment. I just had one. Can I add something? It was just for tomorrow. There's a meeting tomorrow, the county supervisor. Remember tomorrow morning at 9:30, the county supervisors meeting. Although there's nothing on the agenda for Affaball Page, but there is an item on the agenda. Ms. Bokamp, that was, what item was it?
It was on the supplemental agenda, item 3-D.
Yeah, it's regarding $200,000 for the juvenile justice. They're going to use it, the CDBG money for some thing. But anyway, tomorrow, if you want to get on the call, you got to be on at 9 to get in the queue and make sure you follow the instructions, although it always doesn't work. But just to voice your opposition to Affaball Page being transitioned to an SYTF facility and making sure that they do Barry J. Nydorf, Kilpatrick, and Los Padrinos. That's the ticket, the 3 tickets right now. So please get on there. We need to keep this up because it's not decided yet, and we're not sure what's going on because they said this week, next week, we must continue to fight as a community. We do not want that to happen here. It will be devastating to our community. Other than that, our next, we have Monday, March 7th at 5 PM for the city council study session on SB 9. And then our next regular meeting in Laverne City Council is scheduled for Monday, March 7th at 6:30 PM. And we are at 8:01 PM. We will adjourn at 8:01 PM to our next meeting. Thank you, everyone.